This is the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. The Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. With Stuart Cameron and Dale Clancy.
Hello and welcome to the 6th edition of the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast, and 3 more clubs lost their 100% record last Saturday, so the only 2 with bonus point wins in all 5 games they've played so far are Ayr from National 1 and Lasswade in National 2. Our congratulations to them, with honourable mentions of course to Alan Glens and Orkney in National League 3 and Garnock in National League 4, who are still unbeaten this season. More on that throughout the show, but as usual I'm joined by Dale Clancy and his crystal ball to cast our eyes over what happened last Saturday and take a look at what we think will happen this weekend. But let's start with the elephant in the room. Yes, there it is. We're referring to your crystal ball, of course, which didn't work last week at all, did it?
Well, no, it never. But I've just come into the studio, obviously, and seen you picking the splinters out your own arse because you never gave any predictions at all. But, you know, I off the balance of what I'd seen in the beginning of the season, I still did think Curry were going into favourites. And I'm happy to be proven wrong. Hoyk put in a really good performance at home. I think there's been a couple of tongue-in-cheek comments on social media, which is great because it shows us that there's an interest in...
It's banter.
Robin did call me out on radio, which I'm still a little bit upset about, but
yes,
I've told him that I'm going to
deal with him later.
Yeah, I've told him I'm going to egg his windows, but they're going to be hard-boiled, so... Yeah, we'll deal with him in a bit.
But Hoyk, of course, you said they were second favourites in a 2-horse race to Curry. Aberdeen Grammar would get their first win. Biggar would win at home at last. And I'm sure you also predicted a Peebles win as well, didn't you? So how do you plead here?
Yeah, it's just one of those weekends that the bigger game, they were in front by a big margin for most of it, then Highland come back and...
By the way, the Dale Clancy voodoo dolls available in Hoyk actually sold out at the end of the day, widely used as well. So to be fair, I think we should take your crystal ball and there we are, smashed on the floor, never to be seen again. And actually, we got a note from Matty Douglas this week pleading for you to make Jed Forrest favourites this weekend so that he doesn't need to do the team talk.
I think there's a fat chance of that happening.
Now you're going to upset the Jed people. So there we are. So the new stock of voodoo dolls will be available in the high street at Jedburgh. OK, shall we get on to the programme?
Yeah, please.
OK, let's start as usual with the Premiership, the results from last weekend. Glasgow Hawks 26, Edinburgh Accies 32. Now Accies were 90-0 up, going great guns. Big fight back from Hawks, got to I think within a point. Accies just went away and got the 32-26 win. Yeah,
Edinburgh Accies have shown so far this season that they can score tries, and Hawks we've said it time and time again about their squad, their makeup. Sometimes they click, sometimes they don't. They're towards the foot of the table, but Edinburgh Accies is just able to accumulate more points, and especially on the road, it's difficult to pick up wins in the Premiership on the road, as Curry found out last weekend, obviously. But Edinburgh Accies is able to pick up the win, so it keeps them in contention up towards the top 4. And you think, conversations that I was having during the weekend, they're one of the big 4 that you kind of look at. I think you look at Hoyt, Curry, Mar and Edinburgh Accies, it's going to be difficult for another team to break into that top 4, but Edinburgh Accies is able to build a bit of momentum.
Hoyk 35, Curry 13 was the score. Curry in the lead at half-time, of course, playing pretty well. They got into it. It was 10-3 to Hoyk, of course, and then in the last 2 minutes, including stoppage time, Curry got a try and conversion and a penalty, went in front, so they were in a good shape. But the second half, 25-0, and not many teams will nil Curry.
No, definitely not. I did make my prediction for the first 40 minutes that you asked me. That's a bit edited out. But yeah, I think that the one constant from the beginning of the season was that Curry were scoring a lot of points. They were not conceding a lot, and they were in a really good bill of health. And I did say, it's a naive person to bet against Hoyk at home, and they proved me wrong, but also proved me right in the terms that, I was very naive to bet against them in their own paddock. So they're a different beast at home. They always have been. I've been fortunate to cover a lot of games at Mansfield Park, working on radio and doing things to help support Borders Rugby. And, I was fortunate enough to play there as well. It's difficult to play Hoyk at Mansfield Park. And, again, just backs to the wall. When they're underdogs, they come out fighting, and we're able to pick up a big win. In terms of that win, it's a statement win as well. Especially that second half performance, being able to stop Curry accumulating any points.
Heriots Blues 53, Jed Forrest 20. Jed riddled with injuries. In fact, there was a last-minute call-off. I think Lewis Young couldn't play. In steps Blake Roth at centre.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to the things that we have been speaking about in terms of the depth at Jed Forest. They don't have the depth that some of the other teams, perhaps in that division, do. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the game between Selkirk and Jed Forest and how it was going to be such a big game in the context of that division. I think even Selkirk just have a little bit more depth than them, but obviously we'll come into their game shortly. But it's a difficult weekend to concede 50 points. They're conceding a lot of points, and we keep talking about their defence, but it's not going to improve with personnel being missing and changes in partnerships. And it's not just changes in bringing a centre in for a centre, that's bringing a back row forward into play as a stopgap in the centre. So it's certainly not going to improve your defence.
One which did go to form, Mar 48, Kelso 14. Mar go to the top of the table now because of the Curry result, but it was always going to be a tough match for Kelso, newbies in the Premiership.
Yeah, I think Kelso's thing is going to be being difficult to beat at home at Poynder. Mar obviously are starting to build a lot of confidence, something that they never had last year. You felt, they came down, and I remember a game at Mansfield Park and they were a shadow of themselves. Lost some personnel, but not a lot. They still had a lot of good players in there, in their squad. But they've been able to put some good results together. And I think those games, looking at the games likes of Mar versus Curry, Mar Edinburgh Accies, they'll be big games to really test Mar. But again, a kind of straightforward win for them against newcomers to the Premiership.
And in the other game, it was Selkirk 21, Musselburgh 24. Musselburgh getting that late try to win, and that's 2 away wins against the 2 Borders teams at the bottom end of the table. Absolutely crucial for them, and that bit of insurance, I suppose, in the bag at Stony Hill, that they know that Selkirk and Jed have to go to them later in the season, and that's a position they'd much prefer.
I caught the second half of that game, and I was watching it alongside a couple of ex-Selkirk players. And when I got to the ground for the first 10 minutes, it was all Selkirk. They just had the ball in hand. They were playing in the right areas, and then there was a bit of a 10-minute lull. It got a little bit wetter, and the game kind of ground to a halt slightly. But for the last 20 minutes, it was just Selkirk playing into Musselburgh's hands, giving them easy outs out of their own 22, allowing them to play from deep, but making good yardage. And ultimately, the thing that cost Selkirk in the end was there was a 22-metre dropout. Josh Welsh had taken it, but Ben Pickles actually ran in front of the kicker. The referees brought that back as a penalty. Musselburgh kicked to the corner, build a bit of pressure and then score. Ben has certainly put Selkirk in a bit of a pickle because it's just a lapse of judgment, a bit too keen when you're in front. And I think that's the pressure of playing at the bottom of the Premiership, is when you're under that bit of pressure, perhaps your composure goes. And that was a bit of time that Selkirk could have calmed it down. The leadership needs to then show there and say, let's calm it down, let's just punt this as far as possible down the pitch, allow them to try and play out and try and force them into mistakes. But what they did was they got the 22 drop out, they tried to go quickly, and Ben Pickles tried to just steal a march, and from that the game turned. Musselburgh got a bit of territory, a bit of pressure, scored the try, and you could see the celebrations. It was probably a game that they thought they were beaten in, managed to claw their way back in and get a vital win.
Just like last season. Yeah,
exactly. It's a new season, but some same scenarios playing up, and Selkirk's probably not a game that Selkirk were beaten in, but they certainly beat themselves because they played into Musselburgh's hands the last 20 minutes and just gave them cheap territory. They were falling off tackles. They were probably a little bit narrow in defence further up the field, which allowed Musselburgh to spread the ball a little bit wider in tricky conditions, mind you. They weren't kicking too much, Musselburgh, but when they were building up penalties, they were getting cheap territory. And Selkirk probably, that'll be one that they'll be kicking themselves. And we did say the biggest losers in that game could have potentially been Jed Forest, and Musselburgh have probably done them a favour and kept it quite tight at the bottom.
Okay, let's have a look at that league table then, and Mar go to the top for the first time this season, 21 points for them. Second place, Curry, no points at Mansfield Park, so they stay on 20. Hoyk in third place still on 18. Heriots Blues also have 18. Edinburgh Accies in fifth position on 17. Musselburgh climbing up nicely, 14 points for them with 4 try bonuses as well, which I think they did pretty well on the try bonus front last season. Kelso in 7th position with 10 points. Glasgow Hawks are in 8th with 8 points. Selkirk 9th with 7. and Jed Forrest at the bottom, just the 2 try bonuses. And so to this week, it's Curry at home to Glasgow Hawks. Let's hear first of all from Hawks head coach Andy Hill.
Last week was a really difficult week for us, coming off quite a comprehensive loss to Kelso, and there was still a bit of a hangover there probably come Tuesday night with the players. And testament to the senior lads, they got together, they held discussions amongst the group, the standards that they expected at Hawks, and there was a real kind of backlash on that on the Thursday. We've seen a real improvement in training, and then on the Saturday, unfortunately, it just didn't really transfer over into our performance in the first half. We got ourselves into some good positions, but when we got into those positions, we gifted up possession, and Accies were really quite clinical. And then in the second half, we managed to move a couple of people round about. Josh McConkey came into the centres and made a real big difference within there, and all of a sudden we started to get ourselves back into the game, and we had real momentum on our side. And we got ourselves into a position whereby, not saying we could win the game, but a position where we could push on it and try and win, and get ourselves back in the fight to win and get ourselves in front. However, unfortunately, a couple of mistakes, right at key points after we'd scored, when we'd momentum in our favour, and we handed it back over to Accies in the shape of a jackal turnover at one point, a scrum penalty, and a knock-on off a kick-off, all of which led to a couple of tries and a penalty to allow Accies just to keep themselves just that little bit in front. One of them was obviously really difficult when we were just 1 point behind them. But we have to try and look on, the positives. Did we get better from the week before? Yes, we improved from Kelso, even though that was only probably over the 40 minutes. But I would have said last night was a much better training night than we had last Tuesday as well, and we need to look to try and take that into this week's game against Curry. We know the magnitude of the challenge that we face. Mark Cairns and Ali have always got the team really well prepared. They're probably the best out-and-out rugby team in terms of an attacking style that we come up against each year. Really enjoyed playing against them. We've never come off on the better side of the result since the new Premiership, and that's obviously got to be our target, to go through it Maloney and try and obviously get a result. But we know how difficult that is going to be with them coming off the back of a loss against Hoyt. They're going to be desperate to win. But Hoyt have shown that go away and beat Curry as well this season after that's been their first loss. And that's got to be exciting for the league. That's every team now lost a game, and it just shows you that if you get yourself on a bit of a run of performances, then you're going to get a chance to get back up the top of the end of that table, and that's got to be our focus, because we've had a really difficult start in terms of the teams we've had to play, but that can be no excuse. Other teams have went to these places or came to us and managed to pick up results, and it's now our pressure's on us to now go away and get some of these results so we can start pushing up the table. If not, we're going to find ourselves in a fight down the bottom of the table where I don't think it's where we deserve to be, but the table never lies at the end of the season. So biggest focus this week in Curry and then the weeks after.
Andy Hill. Curry know they didn't perform on Saturday, and they're back at Poynder Park. Are we expecting a backlash?
I don't know, and I'm refusing to pass judgment on this game. No, I think that you will. We've seen reactions from teams in this division early on in this season. We're 5 games in. Hoyk have been defeated. They've reacted really well.
Melrose as well.
Well, Melrose in National 1.
Kelso.
Yeah, are an example. These teams have reacted from heavy defeats, so you would be expecting that Curry will go into the pressure's. It's not off Hawks. I was about to say the pressure's off Hawks, but it isn't at all, because they're towards the foot of the table, and they potentially could find themselves embroiled in a relegation battle themselves. But they definitely go to Poynder second. I'm probably more confidence in that this week than perhaps my prediction last week. But Curry will be needing to respond, because they're now being knocked off their perch. They're not undefeated. They're not perfect. Mar have stolen a march on them. Hoyk have squeezed onto them. So they'll be looking for a reaction at Poynder.
Good one at Raven Place. Edinburgh Accies against Mar. Here's Mar head coach Kenny Diffenthal.
Kelso last weekend were a tough team to break down. We worked really hard through the week to be as clinical as possible once we were scoring opportunities, which we did, which is really pleasing to see. This week against Accies poses a different threat. We haven't had lots of success away to Accies, so we've been working really hard, being clinical again. We'll need to be on our top medal in D, because they play some nice stuff, and make sure that once we enter any scoring zones, we take the points that are on offer.
Kenny Diffenthal. Now, Aki's back in 5th, but they're at home against the league leaders who have already lost in Edinburgh at Goldenacre to Heriot's Blues.
Yeah, I think this is a big test for both sides. Curry and Hoyk last year were just a little bit better than everybody else. It seems a little bit more competitive this year, but to get yourself into a favourable draw for a playoff, and I know it's early in the season, but these two teams realistically are looking for or aiming for a home semi-final in the playoffs. These games will have a big impact in who's going to grab them, because Edinburgh Accies as well. They've perhaps not had a brilliant start to the league. Obviously lost 2 games already, defeated by Hoyk as well. That was at Rayburn Place. So this is a big game for Edinburgh Accies. They could end up finding themselves in the position where they're sitting in 4th, potentially going into 5th with another team putting pressure on them. So home form's going to count here, and they'll be hoping to try and get one up on Mar. But again, off the back of the way that they've been playing recently, it's going to be a really competitive battle.
Next up, Jed Forest versus Hoyk. Both derbies this season haven't exactly been dull, tight affairs. They've been high-scoring matches. Is this trend going to continue? Well, we'll hear from Hoyk boss Matty Douglas in a second. Right after Jed Forest's David Grieve.
So on Saturday, we were up at Heriot's again. It was a real Jekyll and Hyde performance. The game couldn't have started any worse for us. We were 10-0 down after, I would say, about 5 minutes. But credit to the boys, we've got ourselves back in it. We've scored 2 tries, converted one, so it put us in the lead. We're pretty comfortable. Heriot scored again, but again, there was no panic. We felt we were in the game, but just before half-time, they scored another try. It was a really soft try, to be fair, and that put Heriot's in the front foot. Second half, we just kind of fell to pieces, to be honest with you. We were picking up injuries left, right and centre, and we just couldn't reply. But again, we didn't go completely down, scored right at the end, so there's another positive for us. This week, we've got Hoyk. There's no bigger challenge at the moment in club rugby. But we just have to go out there, and we've got an attitude of we've got nothing to lose, and just have a go, and hopefully we can take something for the game.
Yeah, look, we're excited for this weekend and to get back into another border derby. They're always, a tough battle to play in, and especially heading to Riverside this week. Jed haven't started the season the greatest, but look, any Jed team at home is tough to beat. They're formidable in scoring points, and they'll be looking to get back to winning ways. So for us, we've prepped and the same as any other week, and we've worked hard at training. There's obviously been a real energy and buzz Tuesday, Thursday this week, and it comes down to a big performance last weekend against Curry. I thought against Curry, second half is probably some of the best rugby we've played in a long time. I thought we were clinical, we took our opportunities, and we starved Curry a ball. And when you do that, you make it tough for teams to score points. And look, heading into half time last week, I was a bit disappointed that we didn't kick on as much as I thought we would after the first 20 minutes and the way we started. But looking back at the game, credit to the players. We defended for at least 15 minutes of the last part of the first half, and we made, I think, around 81, 82 tackles. And when you put that into consideration, the week before at Accies, the whole game we made 72. So there was a big emphasis on our defence on Saturday, and I say every week, defences win games, and credit to the players putting a massive shift, and I think we deserved the win at the end, and to grab the bonus point was a massive boost for the players, as the last couple of weeks we struggled to pick bonus points up. So look, we're in a good place heading into this weekend, I think, and the squad's highs and us as coaches, that win last week shows people outside Hoyk what our intentions are this season, and look, we're going to continue to work hard, and we'll put every effort in to ensure that we can achieve our goals this season. So, attention turns to Jed this weekend, and we need to be clinical, and we need to approach this with the right sort of attitude and mentality. And look, we're we're excited to get back onto the pitch and continue to improve on little areas that we feel we can get better in. So it is a border derby. These sometimes turn into dogfights and they can go down to the wire. But for us, we want to play our own game and we want to take the game to Jed. So look, we're excited for it. And again, we've got a tough selection ahead of us. A few boys back training this week that were unavailable. So we'll see how boys train and see where we end up. But look, it's great to have as many boys in and around the sessions with 35, 36 boys training Tuesday, Thursday, and we're able to get a quality seconds team out on a Friday night. So for us, we're in a good place and we head into Saturday excited for it.
Matty Douglas, and before him it was David Grieve. So what's the verdict on this one?
Jed are leaking points. They're very porous in defence, and Hoyk put in a brilliant performance against Curry. Looking at the table early on, you've got to go with a Hoyk win. Jed Forest are difficult to play at home, and they're even more difficult in a border derby. They were able to score a lot of points against Selkirk away from home, but this is a different task. I feel that the squad that Hoyk have, they've got such a strong pack, loads of great players in there. Dalton Redpath, Sean Muir, Jay Linton in there. They're different. Even the way they're the kind of spine of the scrum, but they all offer almost the same thing, and they're all so industrious in the loose. They've got such great engines on them. You just feel that against a kind of youthful and disjointed Jed pack, they will get the upper hand there, and after that it's just a matter of how they want to play the game. So I feel that Hoyk they'll control proceedings, and Jed will have to probably feed off scraps, which is probably everyone in Jed will hate us now as well. But but that is just the way that things have been going for Jed. They're threadbare at the moment. Their squad has been suffering from injuries, players perhaps not available as well, waiting on the return of players. Hoyk aren't. Hoyk have got a squad who have been recent double champions. They've not lost a lot of personnel. Added a couple in as well, like Sir Russell Anderson coming in. Adds they've lost Matty Carrier, who was a club captain, but they've brought in a Southern Knight. So it's a great replacement there in terms of squad depth. So Hoyk could go into that. Stronger pack, better in the backs. So it's just a matter of if they can kind of keep the continuity and keep it together.
And Jed actually spoiled the party for Hoyk last year, because this is also a double as a border league match, as is the other game between Kelso and Selkirk, which we'll come to in a second. But they actually won the second half at Riverside Park last season, and because of the points difference, Selkirk getting a better points difference, it was Selkirk that went to the final of the border league, and Hoyk didn't. One of the only trophy that they actually didn't get last year.
Yeah, that was almost one of those games that I think the first 40 minutes, Hoyk had pretty comfortably won it. I can't remember if he even got the bonus point, because that was a thing earlier in the season that Hoyk weren't getting all the bonus points together, but they were winning. Yeah, and they did spoil the party. I just think it's a slightly different Jed team now. I just don't see it happening. I don't think Jed have the squad there at the moment to compete with Hoyk, and that is just where we are. It's the kind of truth in the matter. Don't get me wrong, Jed are a club that I admire quite a lot. I love their brand of rugby, loved playing against them, I've loved covering them as well. But I just think at the moment they're going through that difficult period where they're having to try and transition out of some of the more experienced players leaving and some of the newer ones coming through, and it's going to be tough for them. But they'll have great endeavour on Saturday, but it's a difficult task against a kind of scorched Hoyk who have already been defeated this season on the road.
Kelso versus Selkirk, Border Derby number 2. Sesh Henderson of Selkirk we're going to hear from, and first of all, Director of Rugby at Kelso, and that of course is Neil Hinnigan.
We've been working away on our defence from last weekend, another hard away trip up at Mar, and we leaked a lot of points. So last night at training we were working away on how to tighten up again and try and stay in the game for longer periods of time and give ourselves every opportunity to try and win the match or get something out of the game. We're at the moment away from home. We're becoming very quickly out of the match, and going forward we're going to have to combat that. But back at home we obviously will be a bit more confident in being in the match for longer, and obviously Selkirk are in and around where we are in the league at the moment in similar positions, so it'll be a big step forward in the right direction for whoever can win this game. So we're fully aware how important it is. We need to bring that we need to bring a bit more physicality than we did last week, and we need to work on keeping the ball again for longer periods of time and just exerting more pressure. And again, we're just tidying up on set piece. So there's a lot going on at the moment. We've got lots to work on, but overall we feel in a good place, and there's a good mood in the camp. And there was 40 odd boys there training last night and working hard to improve. So we'll see how much improvement we can get this week from last week, and hopefully a similar performance to what we got against Glasgow Hawks a couple of weeks ago, and that would probably give us a good chance of winning the game. But Selkirk are a really good side. They play expansive rugby as well. They want to throw the ball about when they can, and obviously got a good front row, really dominant front row there with Luke Petty, and they're very experienced. So yeah, we've looked at them as well. So yeah, it's going to be a tough match, but one that obviously is a really good one on the calendar to look forward to. And it's been a while since we played Selkirk in a league match, so yeah, we'll certainly enjoy the moment, and be a big crowd. And I think the lunch is almost sold out as well, so should be a good day at Poynder. On the selection front, we're pretty settled from the last couple of weeks. That's pretty much where we are. There's not many changes at all.
So, Kelso 7th, Selkirk 9th, 1 win each this season from 5 games, 2 draws though for Kelso, and critically that gives them a 3-point cushion over Selkirk at this moment.
Yeah, I think we spoke about home form. Kelso obviously at Poynder, they'll revel in this, another border derby, their first one at home this season in the Premiership, so it'll be a great occasion at Poynder again. Selkirk, I just think, they've got loads of talented rugby players in their, as do Kelso. Selkirk have got loads of talented rugby players in their team. There's just something not clicking for them at the moment. Just to throw that game away against Musselburgh, who, on paper they look the better side, and for the kind of for the 50 minutes, because I was hearing what it was like before, but for that 50-minute period they were the better team. It's just a half hour that's let them slip away. I dare not call this. I think you would go for home advantage because Kelso have been closer in games, and they seem again like a team that rise to the occasion at home. But it's going to be, I think this will be a tighter border derby than ones that we've seen so far. I don't know if you want to predict anything, Stuart.
I sit on the fence. You are the pundit. That's how it works.
Fair enough.
That way I keep out of trouble.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Okay, the other game is Musselburgh against Heriot's Blues. Thoughts on this one? Because I think this is actually quite an interesting game, this one.
Heriot's got off to a great start to the season, but they've been defeated once so far. Musselburgh, they've had 2 defeats, but I don't think the table paints the full picture at the moment for either of these sides, because Heriot's, in the games that they've played the teams towards the top of the division, they've probably been emphatically beaten, but they've put in such a big performance against Jed last week, and they've been on the other side of it. There could almost be 3 sections of this league. We could have 3 teams at the bottom, 4 at the top, and then the ones in between just stealing points off each other. And I think Musselburgh are the team that are bridging that gap at the moment. They've got the forward pack to deal with it. We've seen that against Selkirk. They were able to just keep it tight, muscle Selkirk into errors and mistakes, and then play rugby in the right areas. It's just going to be one of those games that they're almost going to contrast each other, because Musselburgh are quite a forward orientated team. Heriot's like to throw the ball about, so it's going to be certainly an interesting battle. But Musselburgh at home as well comes down to home form. You need to win your games at home in the Premiership and try and pick up stuff on the road, but it could be one of those mid-table battles that they just end up stealing points of each other home and away.
Let's move on to National 1 then. The results from last week, starting with Ayr 39, Watsonians 27, 5 games for Ayr, 5 bonus point wins.
Yeah, and for in periods in that game it was a lot closer, but Ayr again just be able to go through the gears and just show their strength that they've got in National 1 after a really impressive win against Melrose the weekend before. It continues their kind of surge towards the top of the table, so they've built up quite a nice cushion now, so they can almost afford a slip up, but we look at the National 1 table last year, the teams at the end could ill afford the slip ups, so Ayr will be sure that they're not complacent, but again just they're not conceding a lot of points, they're scoring a lot, and they were able to just pull away for Watsonians in the end.
Biggar 20, Highland 25. Highland proving again that they can actually travel and win. They've won at Dundee, they've won at Biggar now, and in fact they've won 4 out of 5 this season, up to second place. So kind of coming under the radar a wee bit there, but fair play to them, serious contenders for promotion.
Yeah, I think so at this stage, looking at the games that we've had and with those stats, you've got to say yes, you've got to have them in the conversation. The one thing that Highland have notoriously been is bad travellers, and there's a difficult place to go as Hartree Mill, a really, really difficult ground to go at. Biggar are a well-supported club, but in a difficult, tight game, Highland were able to come out the other end and pick up the victory. And again, Biggar going another week without winning, so that's starting to seep into Biggar now, and there will be a time that they might get cut adrift, but still a long, long time in this season to go. But Highland's shown that they can do it on the road.
And as you say, Biggar still without a win, but 5 bonus points. So I mean, they're being competitive.
Yeah, I think that might prove pivotal come the end of the season. Highland have conceded the least points so far in the league to date. So Biggar obviously able to put some points on them, pick up another bonus point as well. And then things might become pivotal towards the end of the season, because, this might be one of those years that National 1 is a little bit tighter at the bottom than it is at the top, because the way that the 10-team leagues have panned out. But Biggar at the moment, they're propping everybody up, and they'll have to try and turn the tide soon and pick up a win.
GHA 27, Dundee 10, another one which went pretty much to form.
Yeah, and it puts GHA up in third, and Dundee were off the back of a good win the weekend before as well. They were looking to try and build a bit of momentum, but again, just not able to compete with GHA. And we know what strength that they bring. They've come down from the Premiership. They've been there for a while as well, so they'll be hoping to try and rebuild and get back there. It's not easy to get out National 1. Just ask Ayr, Melrose, Gala that question. It's certainly not an easy league to get out of. But Dundee, just coming off second best against GHA.
GHK 5, Glasgow Accies 69. Now this is interesting because that's the second heavy defeat for GHK this season, at home as well, this one, and yet they've posted a couple of wins. Accies 3 out of 5. This was the match played on Friday night.
Yeah, I think the Glasgow teams in this division, the results that they've all had have been pretty volatile, to be fair. It's probably quite difficult to predict because they've all picked up victories. They've all been on the end of heavy defeats as well. So, it's difficult to try and see which one of those teams is the most competitive. Now, we're used to this in Borders Rugby. You just spoke about it before, about the Border League, how Jed, hindered Hoyk winning the treble last year pretty much with the Border League. Now, that also seeps into that type of Glasgow derby there. It can sometimes go against form, but, looking at that battle there between Glasgow Accies and GHK, obviously Accies have put in a really, really solid performance and really put them at the sword, and again puts them up beside GHA in the table, the 4th place.
Melrose 53, Gala 31, another big high-scoring derby in the Borders. And Melrose bouncing back, of course, from the defeat against Ayr, but they had Struan Hutchison back, Douglas Crawford was back, Donald Crawford was in there as well, all restored to the side. And I have to say I was very impressed with young Matty Bertram on the wing, who scored, I think, their second or the third try. He looks a really good acquisition for Melrose. And a try bonus for Gala, but Liam Scott really not happy after the match.
Yeah, I think Matty Bertram's been playing in the seconds for the Storm quite a bit. So it's good to see those Melrose players still getting the conveyor belt, still getting the opportunity to come through. A lot of good players at Melrose. I think both sides will be disappointed in the end. Obviously Melrose will be chuffed to bits. You did see on social media that they took their they obviously had their dressing room photo, so they're obviously glad to beat their near rival and pick up the try bonus win as well. Full 5 points, but they've conceded a lot of points as well. So knowing Ian Chisholm, he won't be happy with the way that his defence has gone. But I was always told, Gary Parker was obviously never disrespect a win, because there's always something you can take out of it. But the defence there from Melrose is an area they'll want to shore up on, because yes, you've scored a lot of points, but you've also been quite complacent in defence. So Gala have the other side of things as well. They've still been able to score points on the road, but they've conceded. They've just not been able to get into that game at any point because of the margin that they've ended up coming off second best in. So Gala, they've had one of those seasons that's not started off well, and they've started to find their feet, and it's just another bump in the road as they start to find that kind of new rhythm with some new players coming through and new coaching staff.
Let's have a look at the league table then in National 1. Ayr at the top, 5 wins from 5, and a big 109-point difference as well. All 5 try bonuses, 25 points at the top. You can't really argue with that. Second, it's Highlands, 6 points adrift on 19. GHA in third on 17. Glasgow Accies in fourth on points difference, just 1 point difference, in fact, 37 to 36, both on 17. Then we've got Melrose in fifth on 16 with their 3 wins so far. Gala in 6th position on 12. Watsoni in 7th on 11. GHK 8th on 10 points. Dundee 9th with 6, and Biggar with 5 points, 5 bonuses for them, which hopefully from their point of view is going to stand them in good stead later on in the season. And so Saturday's games, starting with Dundee against GHK. It's a basement battle, 9th against 8th. GHK with the worst points difference in the league, minus 147, but 2 wins in the W column.
Yeah, I think, that game is certainly going to be a big one. Biggar will have a keen eye on it as well, because they've got a difficult game coming up this weekend as well. But, Dundee at home, they'll be pleased to have this game at home at this stage in the season. They'll be wanting to put in a good performance and try and get a little bit of a cushion between them and Biggar. It's no coincidence that those teams are at the bottom of the table at this stage, because they've not been able to, get as many victories as everybody else. So, it's going to be pivotal that they pick up points, especially at home, and Dundee and GHK is a big game at the bottom.
Gala versus Ayr, another huge game. Gala hard to beat at home. Both wins coming at Netherdale for them. And now they welcome unbeaten Ayr. Thoughts of Ayr head coach Grant Anderson and first director of rugby at Gala, Ewan Swinton.
Our game last week against Melrose was disappointing for us. We had been more hopeful of doing much better than we did. The side just did not play to their full potential. We probably got what we deserved out of the game, bonus point for the 4 tries, but we certainly had expected and hoped for better from last weekend. Melrose were just that bit stronger. It was really nice to see the return of Douglas Crawford after such a long absence. He's both a lovely lad and a very, very good scrum half, and I think he perhaps was the difference between the sides on Saturday. So yeah, disappointed in that. However, not downhearted. We know that we can do much better, and the boys will. So on Saturday we have a huge challenge coming down the road in the shape of Ayr. They are going like a barnstorming team. They're brushing everyone aside. We're led to expect that we're going to meet a thoroughly professional organisation from the time they get off the bus through the warm-up and through the game. I absolutely expect that to be the case. But at the same time, we're confident that we can take that on. We have plenty of strength in the forwards, plenty of pace in the backs. The most important thing for us on Saturday will be how we handle the top 2 inches. If we take the game to Ayr, challenge them, are confident about ourselves, then I think that we can give them a fright. General consensus is that they will come at us and beat us. We don't buy into that. We will do everything in our power to give them a bloody nose at the end of the day. I think that our forwards have the bulk. We've got some fantastic back row players, Liam Scott, Angus Dunn, who can run through gaps. We have strength in the backs, and we just need to be confident. There's no point in tackling this game as a game that we think that we're going to struggle in. It's got to be a game that we look upon as an opportunity, something to set our season rolling in a really meaningful way. So I'm confident that the boys will give it everything. I'm confident that if they have the top 2 inches sorted out, if our attitude is right, then we will do very well. So I'm excited about Saturday, looking forward to it, relish the challenge, and very hopeful that the boys will produce a fantastic performance and will come out on top.
Looking back to last week, we were pleased with the victory and the 5 points. However, we were a wee bit disheartened with some of our kind of processes and some of our systems. The weather didn't obviously help. It was a really wet day down in Ayr, and actually the ground was quite firm so it was quite slippy. So we had 1 or 2 boys falling off of tackles and didn't get some of our systems right, which probably let Watsonians into the game far more than I would have liked. So that's probably our biggest kind of work on. In terms of an attack, I was pleased with it. We showed real composure and real skill actually in that weather. We had very few handling errors, which I was pleased with. And I thought our scrum was outstanding. The platform that gave us was really really successful. We scored 4 out of our 5 tries from scrums, so I was pleased with that. This week we're looking ahead to Gala. We've obviously done our homework, had a little look at them. They've kind of had an indifferent start to the season, I suppose, although again I've said to you before, I'm not really looking too much into results because it kind of boils down to injuries and squads and consistencies and doesn't really help with the World Cup being on and stuff like that, so we don't look too much into that. However, we'll do our homework from their last game, look at what they've tried to do, and then look at what we can target in terms of exposing them and playing towards our strengths. We've got one or two faces returning as well from injury, which is a real positive for us, and I'm hoping that's going to continue to happen over the next couple of weeks, which will put us in a much stronger position player wise than we've been in probably since the start of the season. So looking forward to Saturday, and hopefully the weather's a bit better and we can play a slightly better brand of rugby and attack, and also we can make sure that our defensive system functions properly and help execute that area of our game.
Grant Anderson, and before that Ewan Swinton. Where's this one going?
Yeah, I think you'd be naive to bet against Ayr. You know, they're one of few teams in the...
You were naive last week, weren't you?
Well, yes, so it'll be a Gala win then. But, you know, Ayr have been able to win every game and get a try bonus in every game. They're one of few teams with a 100% record in National League rugby. So they've already shown as well that they can come down and play a near rival in the Borders as well and pick up that bonus point victory. So I don't think it'll scare them too much, but, you know, Gala have obviously shown they've got good form at home. So, you know, they'll test Ayr. They certainly will provide good opposition for them, but you would say that Ayr start that one as favourites.
The corresponding fixture last season was right at the end of the season where it meant absolutely nothing, and it was ended up all the sevens. Gala 7, Ayr 77. But as I say, totally meaningless because that was a game that was put off, I think, a couple of times, and it could have been a match which really meant something earlier on in the season, and then by the end of it, it was all over, and you can't read anything into that. The league had been unpicked at that point, and obviously Kelso were confirmed as champions going up to the Premiership. So, you know, Ayr obviously came down with a strong squad. I think Ayr also went to Stumell and lost that one right at the end of the season as well, didn't they?
Yeah, it's just the fact at that time of the year it clashes with sevens as well. So Gala kind of had their foot in two camps. So, you know, perhaps that doesn't really illustrate too much. The surprising thing is that Stuart's Melville beat Ayr at that point in the season in terms of the way that they've been playing this year. But you know, Ayr they've played really, really well so far. Everybody that's provided opposition, even a tricky game against Watsonians who, you know, have been playing in waves and fits as well, they were able to pick up that bonus point victory, stretch away from them. I think they're certainly favourites at the moment to be chased down in that league as there's only one that goes up to the Premiership.
Glasgow Accies against Biggar. Accies coming off the back of that big win last Friday night against GHK. Biggar, as we mentioned before, still looking for that win. Yeah, 4 try bonuses as well for Glasgow Accies, so they know their way to the try line. Biggar need to get a victory at some point soon. They just seem to, in games that they're close in, especially at home, you know, the Highland game they think about the Ayr game as well. You know, those games that they potentially could get themselves into winning positions, they're coming off second best. There's games that they've been absolutely trounced, and one of them was at home as well. You know, Melrose emphatically beat them at Hartree Mill, so Biggar will be desperate to get a victory, but Glasgow Accies, especially off the back of their victory last weekend, putting on a lot of points against a rival. You know, it was a derby in terms of what they were playing. You know, it's almost a West Coast derby again, Biggar against Glasgow Accies, and we'll be watching it with interest. It's probably at this stage difficult to predict because of the volatility of the Glasgow results coming through, but yeah, there's one thing that we do know is that Biggar need to get a victory at some point soon. Highland versus Melrose, the 2 plastic pitch specialists. Head coach for Melrose is the always enthusiastic Ian Chisholm.
There's a lot of really pleasing things with performance against Gala at the weekend. Look, we scored a lot of points, but at the same time we conceded 31. And look, we spoke about all week that, you know, the things that would keep Gala in the game were our mistakes and our errors. And look, we're playing some really nice rugby, and it's really good to watch. But at the same time, especially with the winter coming and, you know, the weather deteriorating, we're going to have to manage our half a lot better than we have been. Play a little bit less rugby in our half because every single one of Gala's tries came from us either forcing an error in our 10 metre line to our try line or conceding penalties when we've got the ball, and we need to do a better job of controlling games, controlling tempo of games, especially early on. Put a bit more value in position of the pitch over possession, and and just make sure that we're doing all the things that we said we were going to do. But look, it was great to have Doug Crawford back. It was great to have Struan back. Bruce Colvin was outstanding when he moved to the wing. But look, Gala Melrose games, they're really physical games, and we have lost a few boys. Ben McLean took a head knock. Finlay Sinclair has a dead leg. A couple other boys that didn't take contact on Tuesday, that were just sort of waiting to see how they get through it. It's not ideal when you've got a run of games like we do. I think going up to Highland at the weekend, not many teams are going to beat them up there, and we see that as an opportunity to claw back some of the points that we lost in that Ayr game. I'm really familiar with Highland. I'm familiar with how they play. I'm familiar with the players, and a lot of the time you can't really do much about that because of how they play the game. Look, they're going to look to keep the ball alive. They offload when they really have no right to offload. They like to play at tempo, and they've got a big pack that once they get on top of you, it's pretty hard to stop them, especially at home when they've got a big crowd like they will have on Saturday. And like, in my experience, it's always been a good game, and it's always been a game that Highland are really looking forward to. But now it's a game that we look forward to. They have an advantage of being 200 miles away from where we are and playing on an artificial pitch. We're playing on an artificial pitch as well, and we're pretty confident that we can go up there, and if we get our little 1%ers right, that we can stay in that fight and make sure we come away with a result. And this weekend the squad's not going to change an awful lot. Like I said, we need to wait and see who gets through the week, and it is a real slog. Like we went to 10-team leagues, and then we're playing 15, 16 games on the bounce, not including pre-season games and sevens. And like, we're not so bad because we've got a big playing squad. But you look at other towns, especially in the borders, with smaller playing squads than we do, and 15, 16 games on the bounce, and to try and stay competitive in that, it's really difficult. And we just need to make sure that we're stopping them burning out. We need to protect them as well, and where possible use squad rotation. And again, it's really difficult. You want to win, and you want your best squad in the park all the time. But I think you have to be a little bit more pragmatic about selection now with so many games happening. I think if you front load it and go short term, then you might struggle further down the line, especially when the winter comes and people start to feel a little bit poorer in themselves. But look, we're looking forward to the weekend. We are actually really excited about the trip up. We're going up and down on the day, and we want to make sure that we put in a performance that backs it up, because we haven't done that yet. We've had a performance, and then we've maybe struggled a wee bit. We really want to be disciplined around how we approach the game, disciplined around how we play the game, and then disciplined about how we move into next week and move into Glasgow Accies side, who are surprising a lot of teams.
Ian Chisholm. So Highland have lost once this season, Melrose have lost twice, both teams needing a win to put pressure on Ayr, because that points difference is growing.
Yeah, it could be an interesting game in National 1, in terms of the at the top and the bottom of the league at the end of the weekend, in terms of what the gaps are going to be between the bottom and like 10th and 9th, and also 1st and 2nd. But this is a game that neither side will want to lose. You think Melrose, they go into this off the back of a good win, against a near rival. Highland have been able to put a show on the road as well, winning it bigger. Home comforts as well. There's a little bit of a cushion in between them, but if Melrose were to lose this one, you feel that losing 3 games this early in the season, we've still got a long, long way to go. There's going to be defeats coming on the horizon. Are you going to be able to turn the tide around? If, say, for example, Ayr go up to 30 points after this weekend, and Melrose, at best, if they're defeated, say they go up to 18, I think 12 points is far too much to turn round for Melrose to catch Ayr for the rest of the campaign. So it's an interesting game for Melrose, but equally Highland, they need to stay on to the coattails of Ayr, so they'll be wanting to get a victory at home.
And finally, Watsonians against GHA in the other game, 7th against 3rd, and after Watsonians smashing Gala on the first day of the season, seeing them in 7th place is something a bit surprising.
It's slightly surprising, but obviously they've shown that they can compete against some of the top teams. Obviously running Ayr close last weekend, there was points in that game that it was really tight, and it could obviously went the other way, but Ayr just shown their experience and their class, just being able to pull away from Watsonians on that occasion. But GHA are almost in a similar boat to all other teams at the top of the division. They need to win. Realistically, Watsonians aren't going to be promoted this year. I doubt they're going to be relegated either, but you've got to say that GHA have got to be winning this game to keep the pressure on at the top, because it's going to be a big weekend in the shake-up of the league, because we're almost approaching that halfway point where you can start to see the lie of the land. And GHA, if they can pick up a victory, Highland slip up, it means that they're probably next in line to have a shot at air. But if they're defeated, it means that some teams will pass them by, and obviously they start falling down the pecking order, and the concentration, the focus, the goals, the aims, they start to kind of waver as well.
So that's National 1 wrapped up for you. A reminder that you can get in touch with us at podcast@bordersrugby.net and share your thoughts about anything to do with club rugby in Scotland. The email is podcast@bordersrugby.net. Well, let's move on to National League 2, and last week's results were Berwick 19, Newton Stuart 23. Still no win at home for Berwick, but averaging a bonus point a game. Newton Stuart beginning to get into their stride after a slow start.
Yeah, it was actually something that I was asking Graham Patterson. I bumped into him on Sunday and I was asking him about Newton Stuart in particular, about how they'd kind of fallen away, and he was kind of perplexed as well in terms of how their form has gone so early in the season. They were towards the top last year. They've just not been able to really compete in most of their games. But, you know, a win at Scremerston, we know, you know, we've spoken about it before as well, about the Falkirk game a few weeks ago, how difficult it is to go down to Scremerston. So Newton Stuart, they'll be chuffed to bits to go away with the victory.
Gordonians 27, Falkirk 29. Big result for Falkirk after losing to Peebles at home. And Gordonians equally very disappointed with a home loss.
Yeah, I think that is it's a big result there as well. You know, obviously it was a big weekend in National 2 with the teams at the top of the table all kind of competing against each other, but Falkirk just able to scrape away with a narrow victory, which again just allows that pressure on the teams at the top. I do dare say those teams at the top, they'll slip up for the rest of the season. That league is not going to continue in the kind of trajectory it's on just now. There will be periods of time where Peebles or Falkirk or even Gordonians might be top of that division, so it's going to be an interesting campaign in National 2.
Kirkcaldy 25, Aberdeen Grammar 13. Second win now for Kirkcaldy in a row, and first time this season Aberdeen haven't been able to grab a bonus point.
Yeah, I looked at that game and thought it could have been one that Aberdeen, because they'd started to slowly be more competitive in games. You thought that against a Kirkcaldy team that were towards the foot of the table, they could have maybe snuck a victory, but obviously just not able to get the victory there, and Kirkcaldy get their second win of the campaign, and it just again allows that little bit of pressure off them, gives them a little bit of cushion. They've now got two teams below them in the league, so they can start craning their necks upwards and trying to claw their way up the table.
And of course, unavailabilities that sometimes we don't even know about. We're not always privy to the information before a game, and you lose two or three players who can't travel that day, and all of a sudden the whole dynamics has gone from the team.
Yeah, and I think especially in National 2, National 1, and anything really below the Premiership, because in the game nowadays, a lot of the young talented players want to play semi-professional rugby, so that's on offer for players. But some other people just want to represent their clubs now. And I think that's one of the beauties that have come out of the Super Series, is that there's a lot of players who just want to represent their clubs. They're maybe not looking for money nowadays in the game. They just want to represent and play with their mates on a Saturday afternoon. So, if you lose those vital cogs in your team, it can have a huge impact, because you lose a lot of quality. It's not like you can then replace that with similar quality. Sometimes it might be one of the most instrumental players in your team, one of your leaders. They might just be unavailable for work or for family reasons, and sometimes that's hard to replace in National Rugby. So yeah, that sometimes is why we see a lot of these volatile results.
Peebles 26, Lasswade 27. Now, something had to give. Both were unbeaten at the time, and it was Lasswade who came out of the blocks firing on all cylinders with that bonus point in the first half tied up. Peebles did come back, left it a bit late, and if there has been a chink in the armour, I suppose, of Peebles, it's been in the discipline department. Certainly we saw that when we were covering their game at Inverleith against Stuart's Melville. Was that the case in this one?
I think the feedback that I've had is that is the case. They gave Lasswade too much respect, in the opening stages, were a bit soft, didn't play rugby in the right areas, and then got a little bit frustrated as they're chasing the game. And I think John Gray was perhaps one of the players that got yellow carded. He's a really talented young player, but you think about the Peebles squad now, they are all quite young players. There's some older heads in the team: Donald Anderson, Willie Aitken, Neil Hogarth, to name three of them. But it's sometimes the youthfulness and that inexperience does show, and I think that's what it perhaps boils down to. but sometimes you learn a lot more in defeat than victory. It's a game that people's targeted, they should have won and probably could have won on the day, but just gave last week a little bit too much wiggle room at the start, and they were chasing down a huge deficit and just not able to claw it back. Now these young players will learn a lot. I think the frustrations from Graham Patterson will be addressed on the training field this week, and then they go into the weekend and they try and reverse those trends or that behaviour, and that's part and parcel of league rugby.
In the other match, it was Stuart's Melville 38, Stirling County 28. Stu Mel's first win of the season, and for Stirling, 3 defeats in a row now after 2 wins. That's another surprise.
Yeah, it's surprising, I think, as well, because you're attached to the name more than anything else. You're attached to the name Stirling County. I remember, when time playing for Peebles when they were kind of floating between the Premiership, like Stirling County were between the Premiership and the division below, whatever it was called at that time. We've had some Howkins up there because they were just such a powerhouse in club rugby, and to see these big names, you think of Boroughmuir as well, these big names that are starting to fall, you perhaps give them a little bit too much respect just because of what their club name is, but it is surprising. They started off with 2 wins and then played Peebles, I believe it was, and then they were defeated there, and then they went on the back and had 2 defeats, and against a Stuart's Melville side who Alex Haggart, his contributions to this podcast are brilliant, but I don't think I'm being disingenuous by saying that his team haven't been performing as well as he perhaps hoped they would be. The game certainly that I watched against Peebles, they were poor, so that will do them a lot of confidence picking up a victory against Stirling County, and allows them to jump up a couple of places in the division.
And of course, when they were leading by that huge margin, 30 odd points or so in their previous game, had they kept on and won that, they'd actually be in the top half by now.
Yeah, that game against Kirkcaldy, where we had that absolute delightful Shakespeare-like analysis of the game from Alex Haggart. It was a game that's passed them by, and I don't think it's going to be something that Stuart's Melville will look back at the end of the season and go, if only we'd won that. It might be if only we'd won that, we'd finish 3rd or 4th. It's not going to be, I don't think it'll be the difference between relegation, but you have to start winning these games, setting your standards, and then trying to build from there, because otherwise you're just going to regress. So, Stuart's Melville will look at that as an opportunity to pass them by, but they were able to rectify that and go against Stirling County and pick up an impressive victory.
So National 2, Lass Wade at the top with 25 points, all the bonuses, so it's only them and Ayr who have managed a 100% in the season so far. When you consider there's 50 clubs, that's not a bad achievement, 1 in 25 there. Peebles in second on 22, Falkirk third 21, Gordonians 4th 17. So as we mentioned earlier, they really have to get a win this weekend to keep up with the other 3. Newton Stewart similarly with them, they're in 5th place on 14 points. Stirling County in 6th with 11. Stuart's Melville up to 7th with 10 points. Kirkcaldy 8th, 10 points. Berwick in 9th with 7, and Aberdeen Grammar 4 points for them. And in the case of Berwick and Aberdeen Grammar, all their points coming from bonuses. 3 try bonuses for Berwick and for Aberdeen. 2 losing bonuses for Berwick, 1 for Aberdeen Grammar. And let's have a look at this week's fixtures, because the big one is Aberdeen Grammar against Berwick as far as the bottom of the table is concerned. Long trek for Berwick. Let's check in with their forwards coach, Paul Pringle.
So this week we'll be looking to get over what was a very disappointing loss at home to Newton Stewart last week. The game itself went pretty well. The component parts, the forwards, line-out scrums, all operated as we would expect. The defensive structure and shape with the backs was really good. And we did have that cutting edge, when we got in behind them. I suppose for me, probably when we've looked back this week and we've discussed it and looked at the video analysis, it's just small tweaks we need to make, but probably one of the key points for me is really around game management. So just making sure, we keep the pressure on, we don't give the ball away cheaply, don't give the opposition, those golden opportunities to attack us. What we're seeing is our fitness is coming through. The last 3 games, we're kind of scoring late on to get bonus points, but what we really want to do is just up that tempo during the game so that we are getting the benefits of our fitness probably earlier in the game, and instead of fighting for last minute bonus points, we're actually we're competitive and we're actually going for the W. So we had a really good week at training, and just moving forward to this week, which will be a really hard journey up to Aberdeen. We're under no illusions there that it's not going to be an easy task to get our first W. However, the lads they're in the right space, a pretty strong squad. Few late fitness issues that we'll get results on. We know it'll be a tough game. We need to go up there, and really put a performance together. And as we keep ticking these items off, we'll get there and we'll get that first W.
Paul Pringle there. Well, both looking for their first win. Aberdeen could send Berwick to the bottom. A vital match for both.
Yeah, it is a huge game. I think Berwick have been in games and they've competed well. They've not lost a lot of games by a big margin. They've been scoring points. You look at their points deficit there. It's not really that stark. They're ninth in the table, but they've only got minus 43. So it shows that they've been scoring. They have been conceding as well, but they've been there or thereabouts. But this is a big game for Berwick. Especially with the travel. It's a big trip from Berwick to go all the way up to Aberdeen, and it's going to be a really disheartening journey back if they're not able to leave with anything. But in the context of their season, this is one of the games that they need to be targeting and saying that we need to pick up a win and try and restrict Aberdeen from getting anything, because I dare say Aberdeen will be saying the exact same thing in their changing room. They'll be targeting this game as one of the games that they need to win and try and restrict Berwick from picking up any points, because when you're at the top of the league, all you need to do is concentrate on getting wins and trying to get maximum points. It doesn't really matter what other clubs are doing, because you're accumulating the points anyway. But when you're at the bottom, starving other teams of points is really important in a relegation battle, and both those sides will have that in mind on Saturday.
Falkirk versus Stumel. Falkirk in third place. Stumel got their first win, as we've just heard. Here's Stumel's coach, Alex Haggart.
I was absolutely delighted at the weekend. The game against Kirkcaldy was definitely the toughest I think I've been involved in as a rugby. But against Stirling, I thought the boys were outstanding. I absolutely loved how they went about their business. At varying points in that game, we were struggling. We were in a couple of holes. Just before half-time, we were 21-6 down. We scored a try just before half-time, which completely changes the complexion of the game. And we outscored Stirling really well in the second half. I think it was something like 20. I think we were 25. We won the second half 25-7. And I thought our game management was excellent. And that's not just accredited to the halfbacks, although Cammy Lawrence and Jamie Kane did brilliantly as two young players. But I thought Ewan Bone at fullback was brilliant. George Lee made an outstanding contribution off the bench and helped manage the game really well. And I think the key thing for us was we played next to no rugby inside our own half and played a lot of rugby in the opposition half. And we put them under huge amounts of pressure, and we actually ended up kind of holding a genuinely really good Stirling team, a Stirling team with a lot of rugby, a Stirling team with a huge amount of skill and ambition. And I thought we ended up sort of holding them quite nicely and built momentum when the opportunity was there to build momentum. So I think that was massive for us, and it was highlighted and it proved, the game plan and the process and the principles that we have work. It's just about following them and sticking to them and believing in them for 80 minutes, which I was absolutely delighted with. Falkirk next, which will be a huge challenge. Stevie is a good pal of mine, is an outstanding rugby coach, and Falkirk as a club, for me anyway, are a huge example of sustainability and development done in the right way. And when we played in National 2 before COVID, Falkirk were in there. To be honest, they were down at the bottom of the table, trying to avoid relegation, and I was working with Stevie at the time at Royal High, where he was the head of rugby, and I am a history teacher. And he was talking about the worry that they had, and then you look at them now, they just narrowly missed out, probably in the most heartbreaking of fashions, on promotion last year. And they've started like a house on fire this year. They are absolutely flying. They've got some great results. They've got great rugby players, but they've got rugby players who want to play for the club, and they're playing for the right reasons, which is quite a powerful mixture. So to be honest, I think we're going there with the mindset of trying our absolute best to replicate the performance we've got on Saturday, that we had on Saturday, and not playing rugby in our half and playing a lot of rugby in their half, and seeing what that can create for us. But we're well aware of how big this challenge is going up against Falkirk. And to be honest, I know as quite a young team, we're just excited to go up against, one of the best sides in the division and really challenge ourselves and see where we really are.
Alex Hargett, and Alex much happier this week, but Falkirk wanting a home win after slipping up at Sunnyside against Peebles a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it's amazing what a win can do for morale in a team and for a coach as well, and some of the messages that he's perhaps going to be passing on to his players. But it's a difficult journey to go and play Falkirk. They'll be still smarting from their defeat against Peebles a few weeks ago, especially because it was at home, but they still have an opportunity to stay in the fight at the top of the table. There's not a lot separating all those teams, so Falkirk will certainly go into this one favourites on the balance of the last few weeks and the way that the league campaign has gone. But Stuart's Melville go into it off the back of a little bit of confidence after picking up their first win last weekend.
Last Wade against Gordonians, this is going to be a cracker, isn't it? First against fourth, and after 2 losses, Gordonians really need to get that scalp of Peter Wright's men.
Yeah, I think teams like Falkirk and Peebles will be looking at this game with a lot of interest as well, because it's really tight at the top of the table. But Gordonians, if they want to be in the mix with those teams, they need to pick up a victory. But Last Wade again just will be bouncing into this game with confidence, because they had the game wrapped up at the Gates pretty early on last weekend, so they're going into this with a bit of a spring in their step, and they'll be hoping to march on and maintain their 100% record.
Newton Stuart against Peebles is the other match. Plenty of history, of course, between these two clubs. Let's hear from Peebles head coach Graham Patterson.
So clearly we're disappointed with the result last Saturday, but it's about not dwelling on the past and looking forward. That's what we said. We know we're a good side. We know that it's going to be a very tough and competitive league, so there's going to be a couple of kind of blips along the road for everybody, I think, and that's what we've got to look at as a positive from that, is taking those 2 points. Dissecting the game, it clearly was a game of 2 halves, or almost 2 halves, in terms of first 45 minutes was pretty much Last Wade dominating the scoreline. Certainly one breakaway and a couple of tries that were down to kind of poor tackling by ourselves. But we did have some element of control in there. It was just disappointing the way we didn't really mentally turn up in that first half. But then that last 35 minutes, it was very much our guys on top, our guys seizing the momentum, primarily through set piece domination. Again, scrum and line out was very, very good. Allowed us to sort of access into their areas, not easily, but effectively is probably a better word. And we took those opportunities that we had in the second half and scored those tries. The 3 tries in the second half aligned to the one in the first half, which gave us a 4-try bonus point and 1 point away from winning the game. A couple of key moments where, just maybe on reflection, poor decisions by individuals just allowed them to relieve that pressure in the last sort of 7 or 8 minutes, when we did have a potential last opportunity to score that winning try, which some would say, yeah, did we deserve it? I think we did, on reflection, because at the end of the day, if you score more points, then you usually deserve to win the game. But it was obviously not to be. And fair play to Last Wade. They were probably more clinical in the backs. We were probably more dominant in the forwards. So just that 1 point difference in it, and that was the difference at the end of the day. So looking ahead, we've got an opportunity to really pick up ourselves. And that's what the training's been about this week, is just looking ahead to Newton Stuart and concentrating on ourselves, getting ready for that. A really good response for the players at training on Tuesday night. Came with a really good attitude. We're not despondent. We're eager to bounce back. We're looking forward to the long trip down to Newton Stuart and hopefully get a good result down there. They obviously have in the past played a pretty expansive game. They like to run the ball about. The weather conditions look as though it's pretty reasonable at the moment, but we'll look to control what we can control throughout that game and put ourselves in a position to win it. And that's effectively what we're looking to do. Now there's a bit of turnaround in players. James Dow picked up an ankle injury on Saturday there, so he's unavailable. Neil Pate is away on holiday, and Roddy Guinea is preparing to depart to go on his adventure to Australia for his new life over there. So we wish him well, and hopefully we can send him off with a victory as well. But that gives a chance for other guys to come into the squad, to prove themselves, to give themselves an opportunity to play at first 15 level if they haven't played there regularly before or not at all before. So let's see it as an opportunity for these guys to show us what they can do, which will be no easy task. We know that the light at the end of the tunnel is we get a week off after that, so let's reassess ourselves. That's what we're looking to do after this first block of 6, third of the way through the season, and we'll see how we are after that. But looking forward to Saturday, and hopefully it's a good bus trip home.
Graham Patterson, and we saw the first wobble from Peebles last week. Newton Stewart improving all the time.
Yeah, and I think this is a difficult game for Peebles to try and steady the ship, because I remember watching the game. It was a live stream of the game last year at Newton Stewart, and it looked like a really difficult place to play. It was howling a gale. It was challenging conditions. It's a really open park as well. So Peebles will have to be at their best to pick up a victory, because Newton Stewart, although their form perhaps doesn't suggest it, they are a really difficult opponent, and especially off the back of picking up a victory last weekend, they'll be hoping to build on that, and Peebles will be a big scalp for them, and that will also do the teams at the top of the table a bit of favour. But this is going to be a real test of Peebles' character, is travelling to Newton Stewart to try and bounce back and react after a defeat against Lasswade the weekend before.
Stirling County against Kirkcaldy. Stirling began with 2 wins, then 3 defeats. What's inside the mind of Craig Deacon, Stirling's head coach, this week?
We got ourselves off to a really good start on Saturday through at Stuart's Melville. We got a try just before half time, which extended our lead to 21-6. And then from the resulting kick-off reception, we made a mess of our exit, basically. I think our players just switched off. We also gifted them a penalty, which they kicked the ball into the corner. They capitalised off it, and they went into half-time 13-21. The thing for me is it was a massive momentum shifter in the game. When we're looking at a 21-6 nil lead going into half, that would have been looking a lot better. But going in 13-21, you can see that Stuart's Melville were certainly, their spirits were lifted by it. It was very much the same as the way it finished at the end of the first half. We gifted some really easy territory and possession to Stuart's Melville. They took their chances that we gave them. And for me, speaking to the players about this as well, these momentum shifters, these things that we do in the game that allow teams to get a lifeline, it's not good enough. There's standards that we set, and we're certainly off the mark at the moment. You can look at a wee bit of inexperience in there. Players for me are getting their chances to play and take a claim for the jersey, but the little things that are really costly at the moment, like the silly little handling errors, so the penalties in key areas, our discipline was a lot better than the week before. However, it was in key areas that we were giving these penalties away, which teams in this league are going to really kill us. So the boys have reacted really well this week at training. After what we said on Saturday, hopefully get the guys into a really good place for Saturday. We're also going to be lifted as well. We've got a few boys coming back from injury, which is really going to help us out. So Ben Yarrow will be coming back into midfield after being out since the Peebles game with a head knock, and also Chris Hudson, the same head knock from Peebles. We have got quite a long injury list at the moment, but the big thing for me is, we are giving players opportunities to play rugby, gain experience. I think so far to date we've played 5 games, and we've already used 37 players in the first 15 this year. Now, it's not something that I'd been looking to use 37 players, but the big thing for me is, we have got a big pool of players at Stirling County that we can pull upon. So looking forward to playing Kirkcaldy this weekend at Bridge Hall. It should be a big day at the club. We've got it's a 1 o'clock kick-off because we've got the Wolves playing at 3 o'clock against Heriot's. So I know the club's building it up to be a really big day. We've got the under-18s are playing the cup game as well against Mackay. So the club should be really busy with supporters. Hopefully we'll be able to put on a good performance and pick ourselves up after what's been a really tough start to the season for us so far.
Craig Deacons, 2 clubs fairly close to each other geographically. Could be a nervous one, that.
Yeah, I think again looking at the fixtures and where the sides lie in the table, these are interesting games. Early on in the season, as I said about National 1, we're getting closer and closer towards that halfway stage where we can get a kind of truer reflection on how the teams have performed when they've went through one round of games, and at least played each other once. And again, you'll be wanting to pick up that victory. So it's a really important game. I'm surprised, Kirkcaldy and Stirling are in the positions that they're in, but it's an opportunity for one of the teams to try and move further up the table as opposed to being stuck in the kind of quagmire down at the bottom, because there's another interesting battle in there with Berwick Aberdeen, which is going to have a huge ramifications in the lie of the league table at the end of the weekend.
On to National 3, and here are the results from last week. Cartha Queen's Park 10, Allen Glens 62, Allen Glens undefeated still. Howe 567, Dumfries 12, Orkney 31, Hillhead Jordanhill 30. Orkney certainly know how to get over the line there and still unbeaten as well. They've had some very narrow wins, 1 point wins, but they've managed to do it and they're still unbeaten. Preston Lodge 33, Boroughmuir 3. That puts Preston Lodge up to second place. Great win at Penny Pit for them. And Boroughmuir, who have been going very well, that's a bit of a tanking 33 points to 3. And the other match, West of Scotland 33, Hamilton 12. A first win for West of Scotland, but they're still in 10th place. Hamilton 7th, despite no wins because of their 7 bonus points, but no bonus points at Burnbrae for them.
Yeah, it's an interesting league, isn't it, when you look at it in terms of, especially after the results. Boroughmuir were beaten by Orkney, I think it was last weekend. Orkney had to travel and play Boroughmuir and escape with a narrow victory, but then to be on the end of a bit of a tanking against Preston Lodge certainly shows you what the PL team are made of this year, and obviously looking towards the top of that table as well to try and get out of National 3 after being dropped down a division last year. It's competitive at the top of this league, probably even more so than most other divisions. You've got the likes of Orkney, Preston Lodge, Allen Glens in there, and at the foot of the table, the likes of West of Scotland, are at the bottom of the table, but it's interesting to have a team fourth bottom yet to win, but they've picked up that many bonus points. It gives them a little bit of a lifeline.
That table is Allen Glens at the top, 24, Preston Lodge in second, 21, Orkney in third on 21 as well, but undefeated. Fourth, Hillhead Jordanhill on 18, Boroughmuir in fifth with 15, Howe of Fife up to 6th place with 13 points, and then a bit of a scrap down below. 7th, Hamilton with 7, 8th, Cartha Queen's Park with 7, 9th, Dumfries with 7, and West of Scotland at the bottom, not with 7 but with 6. So that's the way the league table is, but that's a very interesting National League Division 3 there.
Yeah, it is, and I think going into this weekend's fixtures as well, it's you're starting to see a truer picture, and I think you look at You do look at that Orkney trip again, travelling to Hamilton, yet to win, but Hamilton are at home. They've shown they can score tries, but they stay in games as well. There's not really a game that they've been a million miles away from, really. So Orkney, if they want to continue their march at the top, they've got to go to Hamilton and pick up a victory. But some other really interesting, you've got top versus bottom as well. So you look at that and think that it's a foregone conclusion that Allen Glens will pick up the victory. But West of Scotland, after last weekend, they were able to pick up a win. They'll be hoping to build on that, because again, another famous name in terms of club rugby down in National 3, fighting to try and stay in that division at least.
So as you mentioned, Allen Glens versus West of Scotland, top versus bottom there. Boroughmuir 5th against Howe of Fife 6th. Dumfries v Cartha 9th versus 8th. Hamilton against Orkney, and Hillhead Jordanhill versus Preston Lodge, which should be a good one as well. 4th against 2nd, and Hillhead Jordanhill with the 3 wins so far, but of course losing to Orkney and losing, I think, to Allen Glens as well. So they've played a couple of the top teams.
Yeah, I think that is a really interesting game as well, Hillhead and Preston Lodge towards the top of the division. So, another big game in National League Rugby, and it's going to have a big impact in terms of, where they're going to be going in terms of their mindset the following weekend. So there's certainly a lot to play for in National 3 between those two sides.
And a word about Hillhead Jordanhill as well, because the first day of the season it was a 10-7 loss, and that was away at Allen Glens. Orkney away from home 31-30. So they've still got to have Orkney and Allen Glens come to visit them at their venue.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty when you get to the halfway stage. If it's still very tight, some of those teams that have not benefited from home advantage can try and really push on and try and make that count in the second half of the season. So, if you've got difficult games after the turn, you try and get as many points on the board to put a little bit of numerical pressure on the other teams in the division. So, it's going to be interesting when we get to the halfway stage to look at those games in detail and try and see who's going to get out of those divisions, because it gives you a truer picture, but there will be some interesting battles on the horizon in all National Rugby.
And that one's certainly my match of the day in National 3, Hillhead Jordanhill against Preston Lodge, 4th against 2nd. That could all change by the end of Saturday. So National 4 then, finally, Dunfermline 31, Ross High 5 from last Saturday, Murrayfield Wanderers 34, Strathmore 52, North Berwick 39, Greenock Wanderers 36, Perthshire 22, Whitecraigs 27, and Stewartry 11, Garnock 27. So Garnock top of the table, unbeaten. They've just dropped the 1 point as far as the try bonus is concerned, but 24 at the top. Whitecraigs in second place. They've lost just once, 22 points for them. Dunfermline in third on 20. Strathmore in fourth place with 17. North Berwick also have 17 but in fifth place. Murrayfield Wanderers 6th with 14. Stewartry 7th with 13. And then at the bottom end, Perthshire in 8th spot, 9 points for them. And Greenock Wanderers and Ross High 9th and 10th respectively, both on 4 points.
Yeah, Garnock still been able to keep up their undefeated streak in that division, so it gives them a good cushion going into this round of fixtures this weekend. But Whitecraigs, hot on their heels as well. A narrow victory over Perthshire, a difficult place to play. But you look at that in the division, Whitecraigs in second, Perthshire in 8th. And there wasn't a lot to separate those two sides at the weekend. So still a lot of interesting fixtures and interesting results in National 4 to come.
So this week it's Garnock against North Berwick, that's first v fifth, but North Berwick have won 3 games so far. Greenock Wanderers versus Murrayfield Wanderers, the battle of the Wanderers there. Ross High against Stewartry, that's 10th versus 7th. Strathmore v Perthshire, 4th versus 8th. And Whitecraigs against Dunfermline has to be the match of the day there. Second place Whitecraigs against Dunfermline in third.
Yeah, I think so. You look at that, there's similar interesting fixtures as we said in National 3. In all the national divisions there's quite a lot of battles towards the top of the table, but in this one your kind of eyes are drawn towards Whitecraigs versus Dunfermline because of the position that they both are in the table, and you think that at this stage, if one of them are able to steal a march, especially Whitecraigs, if they're able to make home advantage count and steal a march on Dunfermline, it gives them a little bit of a breathing room between them, and they can look to start to chase down Garnock. But Garnock obviously need to pick up another victory against North Berwick.
Well, that's us up to date on the Scottish Club Rugby podcast. Plenty to look forward to this weekend across all 5 divisions. Thank you for your support of the podcast. It's going really well after 5, so I hope you're enjoying it and putting the spotlight on club rugby in Scotland. A reminder that Rugby Radio on Saturday will come to you live from Poynder Park from 2:30. Our featured match is in the Premiership. It's a game between Kelso and Selkirk. There'll be television highlights of that game and also Gala versus Ayr in National 1 on Borders Rugby TV over the weekend. And don't forget to check out the website at rugbyradio.co.uk for all the information you need on the 50 clubs playing National Club Rugby in Scotland. If you want to get in touch with us, podcast at bordersrugby.net is the address. But that's it for today from Dale Clancy and me. Thanks for listening and bye for now.